Amazing speakers. I'm going to hand over the Zoom for a moment for Miss Judith Selzer to welcome you herself.
Thanks, Takeata. And so, welcome to everybody. For those of you who I don't already know, I'm Judy Selzer. I'm on the board of the Virginia Women's Foundation. Some of you know me from when I lived in Florida and was on the board of the Women's Foundation of Florida. We are just so excited for this conversation tonight. You have an amazing, smart, talented group of speakers here are going to share so much insight with us. So please know, as you saw, we're also recording this conversation, so we'll be able to share that with folks afterwards. So especially those of you driving, don't try to take notes. We will send out the recording, and there's an opportunity for you all to ask questions as well. Feel free during the conversation to just drop questions in the chat, and we'll be pulling those up. And then we'll also have time at the end for some questions and answers as well. But I'm going to turn things back over to Takeata to kick us.
Oh, thank you so much. I apologize. My dog is losing her mind at the moment. I'm not sure why. So
She
we're
has
going
questions about how to get a job as a dog trainer.
to, right? So we are going to give each of our panelists just a few moments to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their work. So I'm going to go who I see on my screen first, Miss Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Takeata and Judy, for initiating this. And hello, everybody. I'm honored to be on this panel and to hopefully share some of my knowledge with you. I've been in human resources for 41 years, so I've seen a resume or two. I've been in an interview or two, and I've looked for a job myself or two. So hopefully I'm coming at it with some multiple perspectives as those on our panel also have their unique perspectives. So look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. Next, we have Robin Parsons.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So, my name is Robin Parsons. I am a senior recruiter with CareerSource Palm Beach County. And what our organization does is assist both job seekers and employers in Palm Beach County. However, there are career sources throughout the state of Florida. So I work with a variety of employers, and I really place everybody in roles from entry level through middle management through C-suite, everything in between, and all industries. So happy to be here and share knowledge that I've acquired over the years. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Next, I see Miss Dr. Kristy Taylor.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for Takeata and Judy for inviting me. I own a company called WORxK Solutions. I'm a career coach. I'm based here out of the DC area, but formerly based in Florida. I worked at Palm Beach State College as a dean, so I've partnered with Career Source before for Palm Beach County for the Glaze area. But now I'm here in the DC area, and I've been a coach for over 10 years. And I work in the organizational development and training space in human resources. But I do want to say that when I speak tonight, I'm speaking also firsthand because I have been laid off twice and been able to maintain a job due to the federal government layoffs here in DC. So a lot of my work lately has been partnering with nonprofits here in the DC area, doing career transition workshops, resume writing, and coaching people through their process of pivoting and looking at their next step. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Cassie Bacon.
Thank you, Takeata. I am so excited to be here with you all. I've been in talent acquisition for a little bit over 10 years. Currently, I'm a consultant with Impact Search Advisors, where I typically partner with mission-driven organizations on both executive and professional level searches, as well as career transition support. So currently, I'm kind of in a unique space where I see both sides of the situation. I'm advising organizations on what they're needing in a leader, and I'm also helping candidates position themselves effectively in what we all know to be a very competitive and evolving market. So I'm seeing both sides of the process in real time, and I'm actually located in St. Petersburg, Florida. So very excited to be with some fellow Floridians here.
Wonderful. So we're going to jump right into the conversation. A note for our participants, if you have questions as the speakers are speaking, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We will be monitoring those and pulling those out as the discussion moves forward. But there will be a time at the very end of the session that we will open the floor to questions as well. So to just jump right in, Cassie, since you're the one who just spoke, what is the biggest shift you're seeing in today's job market that candidates need to understand right now?
That is such a great question. And with today's market, one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing is the use of AI, and that can show up in a variety of different facets, but particularly in how candidates are initially evaluated. So on the employer side, many organizations are using AI to screen resumes and manage large applicant pools, especially in a very competitive market, which means that candidates are often being assessed before a human, such as myself or Karen on this call, or any of the other folks might be looking at your resume. And so what that means is that it's important that your resume and cover letter materials that you're submitting are more clear than ever, and it's obvious that your materials are aligned with whatever requisition that you're applying to. At the same time, though, AI has really made it a lot easier for candidates to apply to a high volume of roles quickly, right? So as a result, employers are also seeing more applications, but not always that stronger alignment. And so it's really led to employers being more intentional and selective during the hiring process. But what's interesting, though, is while AI is being utilized kind of at what we would call the front end of hiring, it's also increasing the value of what AI can't replicate. So in your interview process, really showcasing your critical thinking, your communication, and your ability to navigate complex situations are really becoming more important, especially in those mid to senior level roles. So for example, I've seen some high quality candidates get filtered out early simply because their resumes were not clearly aligned. So maybe they're missing some of those qualifications that you're seeing listed in a job description, or not having that specific experience that's being outlined. However, when candidates are really presenting their experience in a way that shows that they're an obvious match for that position that they're applying for, they're demonstrating that they are a great fit for that particular organization. So really the takeaway here for me is it's beneficial to be very intentional about how you're presenting your experience and to really focus on clearly communicating your impact and how you're operating in an organization. But I'd really love to open it up to the other panelists to kind of hear their perspectives.
I would love to respond to that because I get a lot of questions about that because people fear AI, right? But to your point, AI can be used strategically. And one of the things that I want to point out when it comes to resume writing is even before we talked about AI and everybody, the big scary AI, right? It was always keyword depth. And so there's some things that we can do with AI using it strategically by there are websites where you can pay to for a keyword depth. Like I'm not gonna say the websites, but you know, you can run your resume through, it'll say 80% match, right? You know what I'm talking about. But you can use AI for the same thing. But one thing that I do want to tell people is that even though keyword depth is important for ATS, we really need to make sure that these bullets are written strategically or however we do our resume. Because I always tell clients action, impact, result. Because employers, they are prioritizing skills over title. So you don't want just a keyword rich resume. You actually want a resume that is going to show result, numbers, quantifying, right? All those things are really important. And so take advantage of the use of this technology, but also be strategic about it. And then also just pointing out when we talk about the shift in the market, because they are prioritizing skills over titles, you probably hear more about skills-based interviewing. Employers want to actually see what you've done versus you just coming in and simply sharing a myriad of tasks that you've completed, right? They want to see the action, impact, results.
And Cassie, from what you mentioned about how they're looking for as much of the job description as possible, I know that's something we talk about a lot when we're in spaces with women, is that women often won't apply for jobs if they don't have 100% of the qualifications. With the new impetus of AI, would you say that that is something we should be paying attention to, because we encourage women, apply even if you only have 60 or 70%. But what does that look like with the use of AI in this process?
So that's a great question. And to Dr. Kristy's point too, it's really making sure that however we are showcasing our experience, we're showcasing it in a strategic manner. And so even if you're not matching 100% of those bullet points, as long as we are showcasing that we have the foundation experience or those translatable experience to basically signal to employers, hey, I will be successful in this role, it's important that folks are still applying, because a lot of times you're not going to have that 100% match. And what on the employer side we're looking for is not just someone that's going to check every single one of those bullet points. It's someone who's going to be able to learn in those positions, someone that's really going to be dedicated to a mission in a nonprofit organization, for example, and someone that is going to be well matched with our team or clients, etc. So we're really looking for a whole person. And what we found with AI is that it can only do that first initial screen, right? Was how many bullet points is this person checking off? And there's so much more depth to a candidate. And so it is important to showcase your impact and some of those transferable skills and still apply for those positions that may be of interest to you. Just really making sure that your experience is written in a way that can show a recruiter, hey, I am well qualified for this. And you can also use tools like your cover letter to fill in some of those gaps that might not be as easily written on your resume.
It's very helpful. So moving into the next is Karen, with your 41 years of experience in the HR field, can you talk a little bit about what strong candidates do consistently that's different during their job search?
Well, thank you for that question. I heard a lot of things that I had jotted down already that were said in question one, but they obviously need to be repeated or could be repeated. You couldn't hear it too many times. Again, is tailoring your resume to the job. That is so important. And we just heard it's not about keywords, but it's showing the value that you can bring for the specific need that the organization has. So you want to be sure. I'm hoping people aren't still using kind of that career objective at the top, because how many of those have you gotten? And if you're in HR and there, you can tell that the person didn't really change it from a previous thing they applied for. Robin, you may have seen that. It's so important if you're applying for a particular job to mention that, make sure, hey, did I change everything? Even though I might have used this for another job that was similar, please be sure it's personalized. You want to also research the company. I know it seems so silly to say, oh, did you look at our website? If that's a question that you ask. But it is surprising the number of folks that don't look at the website. Now, we're not asking you to repeat back the website. We're just hoping that you'll make some particular comment. Well, I didn't know that you did X, Y, and Z. That's fascinating. I hope at some point to learn more. Or how wonderful that, your founder is still in charge. Or, some little fact that really shows that you took a few minutes to look at it and to research the organization, even just, again, as simply as the website. It could be looking into industry competitors. I mean, you can really go all out on that research, but at least look at the website. Preparing thoughtful questions. This is another one that AI has wonderful lists of what types of questions should I ask at an interview, specifically in the industry or the field of X. Gone are the days, of course, like, well, oh, how soon do you need somebody? And I don't mean to be rude, but, that's a question we don't really need to focus on now. We want something very thoughtful that you maybe have gleaned from looking at the website or doing some research. Again, even just, something specific to say, what are you looking for in your ideal candidate? If you can't even, think of something too much else than that, just something that you're really curious, you're interested, you want to learn more about that organization, and you're showing your interest. We've already heard the last two things that I jotted down for myself here is focus on specific examples of your achievement. I received a resume the other day that had over, how you can click. their different skills. This person had clicked like 200 different skills. That's lovely, but I don't need 200 skills for my specific job. If you could, and when I say you, I'm not talking about anybody on this call would ever do that, but I'm just saying job seekers, please, we know that you're very talented and folks are talented, but let's focus on what the employer is looking for. And then the last thing is, again, evidence that person is updating their skills and is, again, curious about the company and how they can add value. So that would be some suggestions I have, and thank you.
Anyone else have input on this piece?
So I also wanted to build off of something that Karen just said, which is one of the things that I find to also be a major standout for folks who show up strong in an interview in particular is, in addition to researching the website, practicing. Interviewing is a second language. It is not something that most people are just speaking on a daily basis. And so really taking the time to sit down and know your resume, know your experience, be able to talk to different examples, and really highlighting what Karen had mentioned, that impact that you've had in those specific things. So that would be the other thing that we have found to really set the difference between someone that might have had a first round interview to someone that's moving forward in the interview process.
Awesome. So when we're hearing it a lot, is like people are applying for jobs and it's just kind of crickets. And so when you're hearing nothing back, what would you say is the first thing that applicants should start evaluating? Cassie, if you want to take this one, I apologize.
Yes. So there's a couple of things that we're seeing. The first one, it kind of goes back to that self-reflection. And I touched on this at the beginning of our call today too, but it's around alignment. How much is my resume or my materials matching the things that I'm applying for? So that's kind of bucket one. And then the second area is, all right, so if all of my bullet points are matching what this job description is asking for, how am I positioning it in a way to say, yes, I can make an impact here? And some ways that we can do that is by including results for any projects that you worked on, including budget size. The more specific you can be to really showcase your experience, the easier it is for not just a recruiter who might be seeing this every day, but the hiring manager who's not seeing resumes every day to say, yes, this person can translate whatever problem it is into results, which is exactly what we want with this organization. The other thing too is that when we send our resume out into sometimes a sea of 1,000 different resumes, one of the things that is helpful is to follow up if you haven't heard back. You are more than welcome and encouraged to reach out to individuals on LinkedIn, reach out, send a connection request, ask for an exploratory conversation to make something that's otherwise very impersonal a touch more personal and start networking within organizations that you're especially interested in.
Go ahead, Karen.
I'd like to add two things to Cassie's comments. An unprofessional email might be a reason, email addresses might be a reason why a person is not hearing back other than the initial thank you for applying, which of course is the standard thing that the applicant tracking system is going to send. I've had so many people want to explain why that email, I have this because it was my dog's name in third grade or something like that, and that's very touching, and I'm happy to have that personal information about them. But again, it may be something that could be a bit off-putting to somebody reading, reading your resume and thinking, okay, now we're going to be replying to a strange, kind of a strangely done email. So a very professional email, I think, is important. And then the last thing I'll add on is help connect the dots. I had a person apply for a aquatics position the other day. And the person had zero mention of aquatics. And again, this was for somebody who obviously can teach aquatics. So I decided to call the person anyway because the resume was interesting. I was thinking about another position. Well, come to find out in chatting with this person in pre-screening, they had an amazing array of aquatics experience that was not anywhere on the resume. So I thought that was just very surprising. But sometimes we know ourselves and we know our capabilities. We might be underselling ourselves. So again, just being very careful, as we've heard, to answer the need that the employer is seeking.
Yeah. So we kind of started to touch on it, but beyond the applications, what are some of the most effective ways to create real opportunities?
Listen, we say network,
Mm.
right? But one of the things that and especially if you're here in the DC area and you've experienced job loss, one of the distinguishing things that I tell people is that make sure that when we're networking, that we understand the difference between a networking group and a support group, right? Because if you go into you think you're going to a networking meeting, but everybody there has no job. Sure, you might get some important contacts, right? But that's more a support group in this space that we're in. So if you're going to network, find out who's going to be there, what strategic connections can you make. Look at the network that you already have, reach out to people. So if we're talking about you applying for jobs and not hearing back, look at the network that you have around you, people that you know, right? Who can vouch for you, who may be connected to positions. Also look at your transferable skills in terms of creating opportunities. One of the things that I've told people also is, depending on what level you are in your career, have a LLC, because you can take on projects that can keep you busy. They can also fill gaps within your resume. So being creative in your strategy and being strategic in your approach, making sure that when you go to networking events, I would even go as far as even say researching some of the people who, if you know certain people are going to be there, researching some of those people and figuring out ways that you can connect and work with them. A lot of what, and then I'll kind of be quiet here, but a lot of what I think happens is that, especially if you haven't been in the job market and connecting with people, we get told to do these 60-second pitches and we get taught to do this. But I like to say that we are in the business, like we're in the business of us. Like I'm in the business of Kristy Taylor, right? So I'm inconsistent in my career brand. And so when you go to these events or you are looking for opportunities and you're seeking to connect with people, listen to what they have to say, but be a resource in the sense that people are looking for you to solve that problem. It could be sharing an email, a source that you created, it could just be something that'll make people remember you. But being savvy like that, it kind of helps with the different creative ways to open doors and build connections with people outside of the traditional norm of I'm going to email or connect with the recruiter. I'm going to reach out to folks on LinkedIn because you probably already have a network, right? But it's about being creative in your approach to how you leverage that network.
And if I could add something else, an effective way I find for job seekers to network, we do have a lot of job fairs. And Dr. Kristy, as you know, being involved with Palm Beach State College, they hold their own job fairs. We hold our own job fairs. And even the networking done at those job fairs, actually meeting somebody face to face. I've actually had candidates who have gotten referrals for positions that the employer didn't even have open at the time, but somebody remembered them from meeting them in person. They made that connection and kept them in mind, and something came open, and they ultimately wound up with that position. So I think anytime you can get in front of any type of a decision maker and they can put a name with a face, and you're not just a resume, piece of paper, that type of thing, that goes so far.
To build off of both of what Robin and Dr. Kristy have shared, the fortune's really in the follow-up. So you're meeting these people, send that connection request, send that email, make sure that you're following up so that you are staying top of those people's mind. Because as Robin mentioned, a lot of times an employer would much rather hire someone that they have a strong track record without having to open it up to a sea of other candidates. And so having those strong connections is really extremely beneficial, especially in today's market.
Yeah, and I want to add one more comment to that because again, we get taught that idea of doing a 60-second pitch, and we think as soon as I meet somebody, I'm going to say, "Hi, my name is Dr. Kristy Taylor, and I work at HR," right? But that is not really how it works. When we're talking about building those connections with people, and if you've never heard the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor, right? A sponsor is somebody who's willing to connect their reputation to yours, and we sometimes we think that a sponsor has to be somebody that we have this long history or in-depth relationship with. Really, it's just that person that saw you as an asset and they understand how you work. So in that follow-up, I can meet Cassie at a conference and she says, I'm trying to make this brochure for an orientation because I've done this before, right? I'm trying to make this brochure for an orientation. I say, oh, you know what? I have a template that you can use. Let me email you that, right? And that solved a quick problem for Cassie. But I mean, months down the road, she might have a project that pops up and they're like looking for somebody who does orientations, and then she remembered that Dr. Kristy has done orientations before, and that kind of in that instance she serves as a sponsor, and that was just a quick. I met her. I told her that I was going to follow up with her, and I served as a resource and an asset for her to solve a situation. And in that moment, that kind of, it's like, okay, she follows up, this helped me, and then maybe down the line she'll remember that. So it can be as something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be as prolific as I deliver to you my 60-second dissertation of who I am, right?
Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to also share, in addition to what we heard about consulting or freelancing with the LLC. That's a great one. Also, volunteering. How can you leverage some of your volunteer opportunities through meeting people, through taking a leadership role, creating an event, that type of thing. You can also, I'm sure everybody's had the LinkedIn presentation about how to use LinkedIn, but of course, focus on a company or a hiring manager or connecting with somebody and then commenting on the posts or following them and showing interest and not just, a like or a thumbs up, but really a thoughtful response to that. And the last thing I'm just going to say, your university or an alumni organization of somewhere, you may be from a university, you might be an alumni, find some alumni from different groups you're in. In human resources, for example, there's all kinds of different groups of HR folks, and try to contact them and leverage that network. And then the last thing I'll say, believe it or not, is we heard about Chamber of Commerce events for networking. Not many people know that sometimes they have job boards, and I don't think people really go to look at them, because when I've placed ads on job boards, I really don't get any responses. So it could be a secret little thing that people don't know about. So check your local chamber. Most of them have free job boards, and those member organizations are looking for you.
Takeata, if it's okay, we've started to get a couple of questions in the chat, so I want to lift some of those up for our guest speakers, if that's okay.
Of course.
So some of this is going back to some of the things you all have already said, because I didn't jump in as quickly with some of the questions from the chat. But several of you were speaking earlier about the importance of tailoring your resume. If you all could just go back to that and touch on it one more time with what advice you have about how much individual candidates should tailor every resume perfectly to a job description versus having maybe a couple versions of it and making sure they're sending in the right one. And kind of trying to read between the lines of the question here from somebody who I know, when one person asks a question, that probably means 10 of us have the question. A candidate could spend all day, it could become a full-time job, creating a brand new resume for every application and a brand new cover letter. And they're also working maybe jobs or taking care of family or, family members. So how much tailoring do you suggest they do to meet the spirit of that work that you're describing? And at the same time, is it okay to just have a couple of versions and then pick the closest one and send it in? What advice do you have for folks so this doesn't become an all-day ordeal that gets them to kind of throw their hands up in the air and stop applying?
I think that there's, a couple of different schools of thought with that. And so I'll just share mine, but I'd love to hear the other panelists as well. So it depends on what a candidate's ultimate goal is, right? when I'm working with candidates, sometimes they're looking at a couple of different job types. For example, one individual in particular was looking for a program manager job, but they were also open to an administrative assistant position just based on the experience that they've had. And so in that type of situation, we would want to have two separate resumes, one for more of a program manager type of role, where we're highlighting skills related to those types of roles versus, an administrative assistant. The other area that I'd recommend having two separate resumes in is when you're shifting industries. So nonprofits typically have a specific language that they're looking for versus corporate versus tech. And so tailoring the resume to if we're looking for similar positions across all three of those, making sure that we're highlighting the proper language that's affiliated with the industry that we're targeting. But I'd love to hear the other panelists' perspective as well.
I use a very simple formula with my clients to help them. So one of the things, if first of all, I want to go back to that statement I made earlier about you are your brand, right? You are in the business of you. So consistency in everything that you do and paying attention to detail in terms of your resume and cover letter and even your brand on LinkedIn, all of it's consistent. So like if you Google me, I'm at least front end, I'm Dr. Kristy Taylor, career coach, but behind the scenes, working in organizational development and HR, even my cover letter, headline, everything is consistent. So one of the approaches that I use with clients, so to kind of keep them from having to rewrite everything over and over again and basically focus on the tailoring, is I like to do maybe one or two good introductory paragraphs in the cover letter. And then I'll say something like, in alignment with the job description or with the job, right? Here's some career experience. I'll say it in that way. And I might put 4 or 5 key points or highlights that specifically align with that job, that has the keywords that showcase my experience. I mean, the goal is not to repeat everything that is exactly on the resume, but it kind of helps with, well, it definitely helps with getting recruiters' attention, and kind of showcases, kind of gets to the point of why you're qualified for the job if you're including a cover letter. And then when they get to the resume, depending on where you are in your career, a couple of different things work. Sometimes with my executive clients, I might put a 2 or 3 line summary of the overall job, and then it'll say, so if Dr. Taylor works for company XYZ, it'll be a descriptor, kind of sort of maybe 2 lines of what they did, their responsibilities, and then we move into highlights, and it might be 4 or 5 bullets that really show action, impact, result. And I think the other thing is people trying to figure out, well, what and how do I quantify? Well, think in terms of numbers. I'll just use a simple example of, like, if I'm working the front desk doing customer service and we saw 20 patients a day, I might say 100 patients a week. All right, at the hospital, what is 100 times 4? 400 patients monthly, right? So think of ways that you can quantify numbers and be able to showcase that stuff in your resume. If you saved, if you did a project and you ended up saving a percentage of cost percentage or helping with the budget, think about the things where you might feel like, well, I didn't manage a budget, but there's a cost associated with what you did. There's a percentage of time that you save, and those are the things that you can actually quantify. And so if you have really good overall bullets that are written when you go to showcase or move, again, I do agree when you are moving into a different, totally different area, right? Because you might do a competency-based resume if I'm moving in a totally different career path, right? And but most of the time, you can just do small tweaks based on those keywords. If you have really good, solid action, use the acronym AIR, action, impact, result, and then look for those ways so that you can actually quantify this stuff in your resume. And then, and nowhere in your resume, you can just, I kind of go in and I show clients, like, if you make a change, if you're applying for this type of role, you can change these words here. It'll still mean the same thing, but you'll hit the types of words that you're seeing in those job descriptions just by changing this out. And to Karen's point, where she mentioned, don't use an objective, use a professional summary. Well, you have a professional summary. Your professional summary is a good, so you got a good cover letter, and then you coming in with a, but remember, you're only going to hold that recruiter's attention for about 7 seconds, right? So don't make it a book. All right. So a good professional summary with keywords in it that you can change out things to bring to that hiring manager or recruiter's attention. And then again, you can kind of shift a little bit of keywords in your bullet statements as long as you got good quantifiable. Because if you're a project manager, project management is a transferable skill anywhere, right? So if you manage projects, so you shouldn't have to change a complete bullet up just to showcase their project management, because some of those are transferable skills that you can use for any job. I could talk about this all day, so let me hand it off to the next person.
And if I could add something else, from a recruiter standpoint, you want to make sure that your resume is absolutely tailored for that job that you're applying to. And just getting back to Karen's point with the aquatic instructor, recruiters are usually moving so quickly to fill roles. We're sometimes going through hundreds of resumes, and Karen had the sense to reach out to that person. But typically, in my case, because I am moving so quickly, I would have said, nope, no aquatic experience, next. So I think that's the key point there, that you need to, whatever that job is showing is required. If you have those skills, make sure they jump out and they identify you as a qualified candidate, because oftentimes we're not going to reach out if it's questionable if you have that skill or not.
And I think related to this great advice you're giving, somebody just dropped in the chat a question about some of our folks on this Zoom who have tremendous experience. Maybe they've been working for an extended period of time. How much advice, what's the advice that you have for our more seasoned candidates? Do they put jobs all the way back from high school and college? Is it the past 10 years, the past 5 years? What advice do you have about what's pertinent and what's not?
At CareerSource, we always advise that a candidate only goes back 10 years. Doesn't show much more than that, because the other issue you can run into is age discrimination. If you're going back and showing your 30 years of experience, any employer can do the math and figure out approximately how old you are. So we usually just focus on the last 10 years of relevant experience.
Yeah, I would add to that by saying, just because I'm here in the DC area, and if you've worked in the federal government space before, their resumes used to look like books. Okay, they literally look like what we use in academia CV, right? And now OPM's hiring process is that you need to limit that to a standard two-page resume. So what I'm going to say is going to be a little bit different, Robin. You can go beyond. I wouldn't go back 30 years, but what I tell candidates is, if you're applying for a job, and especially, let's say most of your career has been, I've been here for 20 plus years, but maybe you did something before, well, let's say the last 5 years you worked somewhere, right? And then maybe you had some different experiences kind of before that. What I would tell you is to put what is relevant, right? So you showcase the last 5 or 10 years of experience, but then also put what is relevant. And that's specifically because of the space that I'm in here in the DC area, right? Because you might have some skills from maybe 15 years ago where you were leading and managing something, and maybe you moved into an individual contributor role, but you still need to showcase that leadership and management experience, right? But then it also speaks to the fact that if the last time you managed people was 10, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, you have the experience, but then you also need to make sure you're highlighting what have you been doing to upskill and to stay relevant and updated on what's happening in that space, right? In the world of leadership and management, if you've been in the individual contributor role. So it can be a mixed bag, depending on where you're living and what starting point you have in your career. Okay.
Thank you for that. And one of the other themes I'm seeing in the chat is frustration, right? So, any sense that you all can give from the different seats you sit in around folks applying to job after job after job, feeling like they're meeting all of the requirements, doing all the things they're saying, and it is crickets. They're not getting through, no screenings, no interviews. What advice do you have folks about how to break through when they're thinking they're doing everything right and they just can't get a response from the job posters, or they're seeing the same jobs posted again and again and again?
I can respond to that because I've seen it happen here, right? Again, in this space I'm working in, where you have so many people who have been laid off and they're trying to figure out what their next steps are. I want to give you guys an example of a client that I recently dealt with, and I'm going to show you. She had been in a situation where she was laid off, and it was, I've done everything. I even hired somebody to do my pay someone to do my resume And she just happened to come to one of my free workshops. So I took a look at her resume. And it goes back to some of those fundamental things that we were talking about earlier with keywords. She paid somebody a few $100s to do her resume for her. And this person was somebody who worked in marketing, and customer relations. She knew how to use tools like Salesforce. She knew how to do, all of those things, right? The person that she paid to do her resume. So here she was saying she did everything right. But then when you actually look at her resume, it was those fundamental things that we've been saying here. Because the resume is not going to get you a job. It should be used to get you a job interview. So if you're applying for roles and you're not, and all you're hearing is crickets, it goes back to those fundamental things. When I looked at that client's resume, what the person who wrote the resume said, she has managed a sales force. It never mentioned using tools like Salesforce, the actual CRM system. So it just says she has managed a Salesforce team, and because of the way it was written, it didn't even showcase the basic skills she needed to be showcasing as someone who's worked in this space, right? So what I would say that if you're not getting any interviews at all, you've gone through all of those processes. Let's go back to the fundamentals, because the resume itself, that is the driver for the interview. And so if it's not popping up on just your basic ATS system, look at it again, have it reviewed again for the keywords and alignment.
I'll just add, I work at a not-for-profit, and it's a smaller not-for-profit, and I do a lot of things besides try to fill positions, and many of you wear lots of hats on this call. So maybe if you're not hearing and sometimes things get delayed, the people are out sick. So many different things could happen. But I'm the type of person, if you can find an HR person, feel free to call, because just sometimes the amount of work, I'm a HR team of one, and so that is a lot. Now, other people, it's their full-time job and they're very busy too. I don't mean to insinuate they're not busy, but hopefully, if it's a person you can find a few minutes to maybe talk with them, what's the status? I think most people who are in this profession are helpful, and they will provide some guidance, or what they can, the time that they can spare. If you ask, hey, do you have a few minutes? I haven't heard back, or what am I missing, or something like that. Hopefully they will share a bit, because again, we're all in this together.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I think also too, depending on where we are in our career, sometimes we apply for the big major job companies, and that's what I saw a lot of in the beginning of people transitioning. I've been able to stay employed in this market because what I usually will do, and so this might be a tip, I'll go on even Indeed, and I will apply for jobs that are those quick submit type of resumes. They're not all scams. Okay, so those quick submit, because what I have found is companies who have the less technological their ATS system is, meaning that if it's a smaller company and you can get that resume in front of an actual hiring person, a recruiter, then they're going to be more likely to take a look at it and get in that one-on-one conversation with you. And so sometimes I'll see on LinkedIn, somebody will say, well, I just posted a job and already a week later I have like 500, 600 applicants, right? Because those are usually the big bosses. Those are usually everybody's going after those roles. But think differently, think out of the box, and don't be afraid to apply for those companies with those simplified ATS systems, because most likely those recruiters are literally looking at those resumes and weeding people out manually versus some of those bigger systems that are using technological tools like AI.
We also have some questions in the chat about things like how to find job fairs in your local community. Where do you look for that kind of information? Or when you're asked during the interview process, what's your salary requirements? How do you answer that and not get stuck? So if you all can each give some general advice about, how to find those job fairs or look for places. What are the websites to look for jobs besides individual companies? How to answer some of the traditional questions that stump people up during the interview process. I think that would be so helpful to the participants as well.
So I can take on the salary because I think being in a not nonprofit kind of recruitment space, sometimes organizations run into having a lower salary band, and and we want to still attract those great candidates. Just like a candidate really needs to ensure that they are being paid for the skill sets that they're bringing into an organization. So there's a couple of things that you can do. One, the first is being realistic about what you are able to potentially make or not make, right? And having a set number in mind going into the conversation. That's kind of step one. And then step two is if you do not see a number posted in the range, asking the recruiter in that first phone screen and saying, hey, when they ask you that question, well, what is the range for this position? And then being able to either talk to that or say, what your range, especially if it is outside of that, having that initial conversation at the beginning of the process ensures that when you get to the end, there's not going to be any surprises on kind of either piece. But I think, Robin, I saw you come off mute, so I wanted to make sure you had a chance to chat.
Yeah, no, not so much related to the salary, but the job fair component. So I know some of the people on the call are in Virginia and other areas. If you have a local workforce board, which is what Career Source is, it's worth looking into an organization like that because a lot of times on their website, they will list job fairs in the community, whether they are hosting them, they're just a participant, or maybe they're just promoting them for another organization. You can also oftentimes find job fairs listed on LinkedIn, and even some employers will post on Indeed, believe it or not, that they are having a job fair in hopes of just attracting a bunch of candidates. So those are some definite resources for job fairs.
It's the same here in, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's the same here in Maryland. So any of your America's job boards, which is where, a lot, I don't know, yeah, which is where a lot of these, the states will be connected to as well. So the same thing for Maryland and Virginia, each of these states, if you go to their Department of Labor, but Virginia has its workforce development agency. Here in Maryland, we have the same thing. And then I was just going to also quickly mention, if you're in the DMV area, don't forget that there are opportunities to work as a government contractor, right? And so one of the things that you really do have to pay attention to. So if you even where you live, Cassie, because where as long as there are like military installations around or government agencies or entities, right, there are opportunities for you to come on board and to work as a contractor. And a lot of these jobs where people have gotten laid off, some of those jobs were converted into government contracting opportunities. So for you to be able to work for private companies and come back, because that's exactly how I was able to kind of come back and transition. And what I would point out to you is pay attention to what is happening with government contracts. So right now, the Department of War, that's a hot area, right? A lot of government contracts are being awarded in that space. So look at those companies who are getting those contracts and look to see what types of jobs are opening up. They're going to be the same types of jobs, the things we're talking about in skills over project management, human resources, people working in IT. So all of those different skill sets are there, but you just have to know what type of contracts are being awarded and what companies to apply for that are getting those contracts, right?
Karen?
Well, I was going to speak a little bit about the question that the person asked about what do I say about my salary or what salary am I looking for? And I know that for women, it's sometimes we're maybe more shy or, that type of thing. Maybe we're not as feeling as comfortable about negotiating or different things. But one of the things I'd like to share is that if you are speaking with somebody, one of the things I've learned is I talk about the salary right away. And I say to people, this might be a bit of a surprise, that we're talking about salary up front. But because we're not for profit, our salary is our salary. We can't really do a lot of wiggle room type of thing. But I do understand that it costs a lot of money to live these days, that people have a certain amount And I tell people this does not in any way indicate your value or lack of. We are grant funded, this, that, and the other. So to maybe understand, but the thing I want to point out as a job seeker is be sure you're asking a lot of questions, because another job may be offering 5 or 10,000 more, but they're not contributing to your health insurance, And so if you're taking maybe a little bit less, another job that you like, when I say a little bit less, I don't mean it that way. I just mean maybe that not-for-profit isn't at that same market rate. But they're subsidizing things. They have more days of pay, paid time off. There's intangibles that you can think about, and time off with family and work-life balance and all those things are intangibles. They certainly, I understand, don't pay the rent or the mortgage or get groceries, but there's something to consider. So maybe again, you're not settling, you're just understanding fully what an employer can offer and what value. So please do think about that. And it's okay to talk about what your needs are and from a salary perspective and what is appropriate, but it opens up a conversation.
Takeata, I was just going to say there's a couple more questions in the chat, but seeing that we just have a few minutes left, I don't know if the speakers want to share any final closing remarks. And then I know we will be able to share contact information for some of the folks so they can follow up, because some of the folks on the call can be hired as coaches to work with folks one-on-one as well.
So Karen, you want to start? Oh, go ahead, Kristy. Dr. Kristy.
I would just say, listen, I know that the job search process, it can be very frustrating. It can be very emotional. I want you to remember that you are in the business of you and that you are a brand, right? And so even the things that we share on social media about the frustration of a job search process, all of that is stuff that you need to be aware of, and ask yourself, is it cohesive with my brand? Like when I see people expressing their emotions on platforms like LinkedIn, right? And the other thing I would tell you, that in the process of managing your emotions with this job search process and the frustrations of it, I want you to remember your value and what you bring to the table, that you're not at a point of desperation. You are somebody who has the experience, you have the know-how. This is a tough job market, right? But don't feel like you are a failure because this didn't work out. You try different strategies, you try different approaches, and eventually something will work out for you. But don't undervalue or undersell yourself simply because things are not working out in this moment.
Go ahead, Cassie.
I was going to say, I could not say that better myself. And just to reiterate, what Dr. Kristy shared, along the same lines of branding, what we're really seeing in successful candidates are those that are taking their time to understand their strengths. They're telling a clear story and they're showing up with confidence to really help kind of create those new opportunities for themselves. Yeah. So I think my takeaway, or the one takeaway I could leave you all with, is you don't need a perfect path. You really need a clear and impactful one. And as long as your resume and materials are telling that story, you'll start to see a little bit of some changes in your results.
Robin, you want to share some last thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, for Christina Wright, I did drop my email address in the chat so that you have that, so we can stay connected. I understand she's in Broward, Palm Beach area. But as far as last thoughts, I think important things to do would be networking. You can never reach out to too many people through LinkedIn if you have a particular company that you're targeting and you're interested in. And then the other thing I would stress is definitely knowing your material when you go into an interview. Practice the top questions that you might be asked by an employer. Work through the STAR method. Know yourself, know your resume, and definitely have some specific tangible results that you can speak to during that process.
Thank you. And Karen?
Just as we've all heard, stay true to yourself and utilizing networking and contacts. Sometimes we think, well, people know we're looking. Well, maybe they really don't. You know, I know especially on LinkedIn, there's so many people that do or don't see things. And there are some friends and previous colleagues you've worked with to really kind of go through that contact list, think about people maybe you've helped in the past, and really try to think, okay, how can I extend my reach? Does everybody that is important to me or I know really understand that I'm looking and for what I'm looking for? And even if they don't have a referral, many times they can help you with an informational interview. And we didn't really speak about those too much, but informational interviews are very helpful. You're speaking to someone, not saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. You're finding out about that company, that career, that opportunity. And of course, everybody likes to talk about themselves and their job, and then they'll be kind of part of your team helping you seek that you've listened to them, asked their advice and counsel, and they can be an effective member of your team. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to our amazing panelists. If you are willing to drop your contact information in the chat, I know many of the participants would love to get that information and follow up. And if you are one of our participants, I definitely encourage you to reach out to any of the folks that are on this panel. They are amazing experts in their fields. Thank you so much, Judith, for co-hosting this with us. And I know that we are exploring additional workshops in this job search arena. So be on the lookout. We'll be sending out more opportunities for everyone. But thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you again to our speakers, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. We'll be emailing out the recording for this and the contact information for folks. So thank you again for participating, and everybody have a fantastic night and good luck with your job search.
Thanks so much. This is amazing.